It was a freezing Tuesday morning in downtown Toronto. The kind of cold that slithered beneath your coat no matter how many layers you wore. Snow flurries swept past Daniel as he shuffled into the tiny corner cafe just outside campus. His fingers trembled, not just from the biting cold, but from anxiety. Daniel had exactly $5.62 to his name. Rent was due in 4 days. He hadn't eaten a full meal in nearly 2. And yet, here he was, standing in line, hoping to buy a small coffee and pretend for a moment that his world wasn't crumbling. As he approached the counter, he clutched a worn-out debit card. His roommate had said it wouldn't go through. But maybe, just maybe, he had a few cents left to cover the coffee. "Small dark roast, please," he said to the barista, his voice tight. As she rang it up, a man behind him let out a quiet groan. Daniel turned slightly. The guy looked about mid-40s, dressed in a navy wool coat and holding a phone to his ear. His eyes darted between the counter and the door. "Sorry, I forgot my wallet," the man whispered to the barista. "Can I send someone to pay later?" She offered an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, we don't hold tabs." The man sighed. "Of course. Never mind then." Daniel looked at him, then at the 2 coins in his palm, the last crumpled bill still in his wallet. Something inside him stirred. He didn't know what it was, pity, impulse, or just a desire to feel like he still had something to give in a world that had taken so much. "I got it," Daniel said, gently sliding the last of his money toward the counter. "Just add his to mine." The man blinked, caught off guard. No, you don't have to do that." "I want to," Daniel said, smiling weakly. "Everyone forgets their wallet sometimes." The barista nodded and rang both drinks together. Daniel accepted his cup, nodded at the man again, and started for the door. "Wait," the man called out. "At least let me get your name." Daniel hesitated. Daniel Morris." The man extended a hand. Elliot Green. "You're a good man, Daniel. I'll pay this forward." Daniel smiled again, this time softer, almost shyly, and walked into the morning fog. Life didn't get easier after that. Daniel worked part-time jobs between classes, tutoring high school students and scrubbing tables at a pizza joint. He slept 5 hours a night, studied endlessly, and still scraped by. He was one of those invisible students, quiet, hard-working, forgettable. By his final year, Daniel had burned out twice. There were days he nearly quit. But he didn't, because somehow that morning stayed with him. The coffee, the handshake, the idea that someone remembered his name. It was foolish to hope it meant anything, but he held on to it like a thread when everything else was fraying. 2 years later, Daniel found himself standing in a glass-walled conference room on the 28th floor of a downtown building. He wore a cheap suit, the kind you get secondhand and pray looks decent enough for an interview. His heart thudded as he waited. The company, Green Tech, was massive, known for innovation in AI, sustainability, and outreach programs. This was his 3rd interview round for a junior analyst role. Getting this job would mean stability, purpose, and finally, breathing room. The door clicked open. Daniel stood, his breath caught in his throat. It was him, the same man from the coffee shop. A little grayer now, but unmistakably Elliot Green. Elliot paused, brow furrowing. Then his eyes lit up with recognition. "Daniel," he said slowly. "Daniel Morris." Daniel swallowed. "Yes, sir. It's good to see you again." A smile tugged at Elliot's mouth. "You're the broke student who bought my coffee." Daniel flushed slightly. "Yeah, that was me." Elliot stepped forward, shaking his hand firmly. "Come, sit. I've been waiting for this." Hey, if this story has caught your attention so far, take a quick second to like, subscribe, and share to help us grow the channel. Your support helps us create more meaningful stories that touch lives. Now, back to the story. The interview wasn't really an interview. They talked for 20 minutes about life, persistence, and small decisions that ripple outward. Elliot listened closely as Daniel shared his journey. Not just the resume parts, but the struggle, the failure, the tiny moments that defined him. When Daniel finished, Elliot leaned back and looked out over the city. "I always wondered what happened to you," he said quietly. "That morning, I was late for a meeting that changed my company's direction. I was about to walk away from a deal I thought was doomed. But your kindness made me pause. I showed up with a fresh perspective and signed the deal anyway. It was the beginning of GreenTech's second wind." Daniel blinked. "I had no idea." "You couldn't have," Elliot smiled. "But that $5 coffee? It reminded me that the world still had good people. I never forgot you." He stood and extended his hand again. "Welcome to the team, Daniel. You're not just hired. You're part of the future we're building." Daniel sat still, speechless. His last $5 had come full circle. And now, the man he helped was offering him not just a job, but a future. The elevator ride to the 28th floor had once felt like an eternity for Daniel. But now, walking through the open concept office of GreenTech with an official employee badge clipped to his shirt, everything felt surreal. Glass walls framed the skyline. Digital displays projected the latest AI insights. Colleagues moved with purpose, ideas flying across workstations like sparks in a forge. And at the center of it all was Elliot Green, the man whose coffee he had once paid for with the last of his money. Elliot hadn't just hired him out of gratitude. Daniel quickly realized he was expected to earn his place here. On his first day, Elliot called him into his office. "You're here because of who you are," Elliot said, his tone measured. "Not because of what you did. I believe in hiring people who've tasted struggle. You'll see the world differently because of it. Now go prove you belong." Daniel nodded. "I will." He meant it. Daniel dove into his role like a man starving for purpose. Late nights were nothing new to him, but now they had meaning. He dissected market data, ran simulations, even pitched ideas in small team meetings. And for the first time, people listened. But success wasn't instant. During his third week, Daniel made a miscalculation in a data model, one that nearly cost the team a major pitch. He spent that night rewriting the entire analysis, checking formulas until sunrise. He submitted the corrected report with a sincere apology. Elliot said nothing the next day. Instead, he forwarded Daniel's revised file to the executive team with a note. "Now this is the kind of resilience we reward." Daniel kept going. Every time he passed the cafe on the corner, the one where he bought that fateful coffee, he paused. It reminded him of where he came from, of the cold morning when a small gesture unknowingly turned the course of his life. For months into the job, Elliot invited him to dinner. It wasn't unusual. He often mentored promising employees over meals. But that evening was different. The restaurant was dimly lit, the kind where deals were made and futures decided. As Daniel settled into the booth, Elliot leaned in. "You ever wonder why I kept your name in my wallet?" Elliot asked. Daniel blinked. "You kept it." "I scribbled it on a napkin that day," Elliot said, smiling. "I didn't know why, but it felt important. I told myself if I ever saw you again, I'd find a way to repay what you gave me. Not the coffee, the reminder." Daniel sipped his water, waiting. "I've been planning to launch a new initiative," Elliot continued. "A foundation that funds scholarships for students who come from nothing. People like you. People with grit." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "That's incredible. I want you to lead the pilot program," Elliot said calmly. "You'd manage the team, set the vision, report directly to me. The words hit Daniel like a wave. Me? But I've only been here 4 months. Elliot nodded. Exactly. You still remember what struggle feels like. That's the empathy this foundation needs. Daniel didn't sleep that night. His mind swirled with fear, excitement, and a creeping doubt. Could he really lead something so important? Was he ready? The next morning, he stood on the rooftop of GreenTech's office building, city wind tugging at his coat. He remembered the version of himself who once stared at vending machines with empty pockets. The version who bought coffee not because he had plenty, but because it felt like the right thing to do. And he realized he didn't need to be ready. He just needed to keep choosing to act with purpose, just like he did that day. The foundation launched quietly but powerfully. Daniel named it Echo Fund, because every act of kindness echoes longer than we think. They funded 6 scholarships in their first month. 6 kids who would have otherwise dropped out. Kids who reminded Daniel of himself. Eyes filled with hunger, hearts filled with hope. One night, after reviewing applications late into the evening, Daniel sat alone in the office lounge. Elliot walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use one, Elliot said, setting it down beside him. Daniel stared at the cup, then smiled. It's funny, he said. I used to think $5 wasn't enough to matter. It's always enough, Elliot replied, when it comes from the right place. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 men linked not by chance, but by choice. As the months passed, Daniel's role grew. The foundation caught media attention. More investors stepped forward. GreenTech built an entire department around it with Daniel as its director. People started calling him the Coffee Kid, a nickname he wore with quiet pride. But Daniel never forgot. Every morning he still walked by that cafe. Some days he went in, bought a stranger's drink, and left without saying a word. Because now he knew kindness doesn't need recognition, just the courage to give when it matters most. Daniel stood in front of the packed auditorium, heart pounding beneath his crisp blazer. The Echo Fund's first anniversary gala was in full swing, and tonight he was no longer just the broke student who had paid for someone's coffee. He was the face of a movement, one that was quietly changing lives. Lights dimmed slightly. The MC tapped the mic. Please welcome the director of the Echo Fund. A man whose story proves that one small act of kindness can ripple into something extraordinary. Daniel Reyes. Applause thundered through the room as Daniel took the stage. His eyes scanned the audience. Students, donors, mentors, and most importantly, recipients of the scholarships. He locked eyes with a girl in the 3rd row, maybe 17, wearing her only pair of formal shoes and holding back tears. He saw himself in her. Daniel stepped up to the podium. I never thought $5 would change my life, he began. But here I am, not because I was lucky, but because I gave when I had nothing to give. The crowd fell silent, hanging on to every word. That morning I bought someone a coffee. I didn't know his name, and he didn't know mine. But what mattered wasn't who we were. It was what we chose to do for each other. The gala was a success. New pledges poured in. Media outlets requested interviews. And GreenTech announced an expansion of the foundation into 3 more cities. Daniel's responsibilities doubled overnight. Elliot Green remained quietly in the background, still mentoring Daniel but giving him more space to lead. At one strategy meeting, Elliot pulled him aside. You're building something that'll outlive both of us, he said. Don't let the spotlight blind you from the mission. Daniel nodded, but something in Elliot's voice gave him pause. There was a tightness in his mentor's smile, a slight slump in his posture. For the first time, Elliot looked tired. A week later, Daniel learned the truth. Elliot had been quietly battling cancer for 6 months. It wasn't public knowledge. Only a few on the board knew. He had insisted on business as usual, refusing to let his condition overshadow the work. Daniel was stunned. "He's been working through treatments," Elliot's assistant confided. "He didn't even tell his own family at first. Said he had unfinished echoes to complete." The phrase echoed in Daniel's head for days. Daniel visited Elliot the next morning, unannounced. He found him on the rooftop garden of GreenTech's headquarters, overlooking the rising city. Elliot gave him a knowing smile. "I figured someone would tell you." "I wish you'd told me," Daniel said, voice quiet. "I didn't want sympathy," Elliot replied. "I wanted to see what you'd do when no one was watching. And you didn't disappoint." Silence passed between them. Then Elliot continued, "I don't know how much time I've got left, but I do know the foundation is in the right hands." Daniel swallowed hard. "You're not going anywhere. We still have work to do." Elliot smiled. "Then let's get to it." In the months that followed, Daniel pushed himself harder than ever. The Echo Fund grew exponentially. They partnered with high schools, held mentorship workshops, and launched an app that let donors connect directly with students they were supporting. One afternoon, Daniel received an email from a small-town principal in New Brunswick. A quiet student named Kevin had written an essay about how a scholarship from the Echo Fund saved his family from eviction. He ended it with, "Now, I want to grow up to build something like this too." Daniel printed it out and pinned it to his office wall. But even as the foundation soared, Elliot's health declined. By winter, he had stepped down from his role as CEO, naming Daniel as one of the youngest board members in company history. "You don't lead with money," Elliot told him. "You lead with memory. Never forget what it felt like to be unseen." Daniel visited him regularly, sometimes bringing reports, sometimes just sitting and watching old movies with him. One night, Elliot handed Daniel a worn-out napkin, the same one he'd written on 2 years ago. "This is what I wrote that day," he said, voice raspy. "Your name, and a promise to myself." Daniel unfolded it slowly. Faded ink, still legible. "Daniel Reyes, remember his kindness." "I did remember," Elliot whispered, "and I always will." A week later, Elliot passed away peacefully in his sleep. Daniel delivered the eulogy. He told the story of the coffee, the napkin, the second chance neither of them had seen coming. "There's a lot I learned from Elliot Green," he said. "But the lesson that matters most is this: what you do in 1 minute can shape the next 10 years of someone's life. Never underestimate the power of a small kindness." Months passed. Seasons changed. But the legacy lived on. The Echo Fund went international. Daniel was invited to speak at global conferences. He started writing a book, Echoes of Kindness, filled with real stories from the people they'd helped. But no matter how high he climbed, he never stopped returning to that same cafe. He always ordered 2 coffees, one for himself, one for a stranger, and he left it paid for without a name, because someone had once done that for him, and the Echo was still moving forward. Rain pattered against the tall glass windows of the GreenTech headquarters as Daniel stared out over the city. The clouds above seemed to carry the weight of something bigger, like the world was holding its breath. He could still hear Elliot's voice echoing in his memory. "You don't lead with money. You lead with memory." It had been 6 months since Elliot's passing. 6 months of board meetings, foundation expansions, and unrelenting press coverage. 6 months of pushing through grief while trying to honor the legacy left in his hands. But today wasn't about meetings or press. Today marked exactly 2 years since he bought that coffee, since his life unknowingly shifted forever. To commemorate it, he was heading back to the very same coffee shop. Alone. No driver, no assistant. Just him. The cafe hadn't changed. The chipped blue door, the hum of the espresso machine, even the same barista was behind the counter. It was like time had gently passed around it. "Long time no see," she said with a smile, recognizing him instantly. "You used to come here nearly every day." "I still think about this place more than I should," Daniel chuckled. He ordered 2 coffees. "One for me," he said, sliding a 20 across the counter. "And one for whoever walks in next. On me." She nodded, understanding. "Still paying it forward?" "Always." Daniel sat at his old corner table, fingers curled around the warm cup. He watched people come and go, students with backpacks, parents with toddlers, workers on break. And then a young man walked in, soaked from the rain, shivering slightly, eyes darting nervously around. His clothes were worn, his shoes were untied, but it was the look in his eyes that struck Daniel, the look of someone holding on by a thread. The barista smiled and pointed to the cup waiting at the counter. "That's for you," she said. The young man blinked. "What?" "Someone already paid for it." He stepped forward slowly, like he couldn't believe it. "Why would anyone do that?" The barista just shrugged and smiled. The young man took the cup and looked around, eyes eventually locking with Daniel's. Daniel gave him a nod, and in that nod was everything. That night, Daniel sat at his desk, a candle lit beside him. He opened his journal, one Elliot had gifted him on the day he became director. The first page still held Elliot's handwriting. "Write your echoes, and the world will remember your kindness." Daniel turned to a new page and began to write. 1 year later, the Echo Fund was now in 15 countries, with over 20,000 scholarships awarded. A documentary based on Daniel's journey had just premiered on a major streaming platform. It was called The Cup That Changed Everything. But none of the success compared to a quiet moment at a university orientation in Chicago. Daniel had flown in to speak, part of a campaign to reach underserved communities. After his talk, a student approached him, a tall, soft-spoken boy named Liam. "I know this might sound crazy," Liam began, "but I think I owe you a coffee." Daniel smiled. "What do you mean?" Liam reached into his backpack and pulled out a crumpled receipt. "Last year, I walked into a coffee shop during a rainstorm, broke, cold, thinking of dropping out of school. Someone had already paid for my coffee. It wasn't just about the drink. It was a sign that someone out there believed in people like me. It gave me the strength to keep going." Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered that day vividly. Liam continued, "That one gesture lit something in me, so I applied to the Echo Fund, got the scholarship, and now I'm here, studying education. I want to be the kind of teacher that reminds kids they matter." Daniel placed a hand on Liam's shoulder, overwhelmed. "You already are," he whispered. Back at headquarters, Daniel held a special meeting with the Foundation's executive board. "I want to create something new," he said. "Something to honor Elliot's legacy, not just with money, but with action. A new branch under the Echo Fund, called the Green Initiative." He clicked the remote. A logo appeared, a single coffee cup with ripples emanating from it. The Green Initiative will train scholarship recipients to become community leaders, educators, and mentors. It's not enough to change a life. We must equip others to do the same. The board unanimously approved. Weeks later, Daniel stood in front of another crowd. This time, in a school gymnasium in Baltimore. Dozens of students, teachers, and parents gathered, many holding their first Echo-funded laptops or books. He shared his story again. The coffee, the napkin, the stranger. He always ended with the same line. One act of kindness may not change the world, but it might change someone's world. And if we all commit to doing that, Well, maybe the world doesn't stand a chance. 2 years later, Daniel sat in a different corner office. This one had Elliot's old plaque on the wall. Green Tech Ventures, CEO, Daniel Reyes. He still visited the cafe once a month. Still bought 2 coffees. Still believed that the world could be different if we acted differently. One morning, his assistant walked in. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's important." Daniel looked up. Did they say their name? No. Just said, "It's about a coffee." Daniel stood slowly, a smile forming. "Send them in."